We covered many things. I'm going to go through them fast because we need to get into the new stuff. So the first question, biological. Who can remember some examples of how biology influences our behavior? Hormones, very good. Another example, raise your hand so I can point to you. Yes? DNA, which is inherited through epigenetics. We talked about epigenetics, right? Transplants, very good. You remembered this one. You like it, huh? You're familiar with the transplant? The concept of transplant is you donate organs. The memories and the life of the organ donor, parts of it gets transferred to the recipient of that organ. And they start having memories and, desires and likes and dislikes that belong to the donor, to the person who died in the process of weird stuff. I'm not saying that's necessarily going to happen to you, inshallah. It will never happen to you. You don't need a transplant of any sort, inshallah. But it's just to be aware that biology influences. Yes? Biology influences. And by the way, do you know why scientists are really shocked and impressed by this and curious about this? Because science in general is telling us that memories are here. So when you do a heart transplant and you transfer memories, that proves what? They're not as smart as they thought they were. You understand? So that's why there is some, hush-hush type of research going on, and they don't want to broadcast it too much because it deflects from their claims of scientism. They believe that science is the end-all and the God of knowledge. Anything that puts a chink in that armor is not good for people who worship scientism. Make sense? Okay. So a second one we talked about, family. I went through it very quickly. And it should be obvious that you learn your values at home, and based on what you learn at home, the rest of your life can be sort of channeled or locked into. Yeah, the rest of your life can be locked or channeled into what you learned at home. And therefore, it's very important to have a good family life for our children. And if you're from the group of people who are unfortunate enough or whatever, did not receive the right guidance at home from your parents, we fall back on that verse from Surah Luqman, وَإِن جَاهَدَاكَ عَلَىٰ أَن تُشْرِكَ بِي مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٌ فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا. If they taught you and put great effort into teaching you something that leads you to shirk, don't follow them. So you're not supposed to follow blindly. In other words, you're supposed to reflect to stop your behavior. So therefore, you have to think. You have to really analyze and do the self-reflection to make sure you're not falling prey to these blinders without really being aware of them. Society and cultural conditioning, we talked about it in a lot of details. What are some examples of social conditioning? Marketing is one of them. Yeah. What else? Taqalid, the traditions of society, right? So in here, you drive by Pasadena or Malibu or anywhere in Los Angeles in July, half the women are, and half the men, right, are dressed in a certain way. Yes? These are habits, these are norms acceptable for this society. Other societies may not find this acceptable, or they have different things. A very interesting example I will share with you quickly. The hijab for certain people is considered to cover the hair, and for other people is to cover the whole face, and so on. For Chinese, the hijab is to cover the feet. To them, it's shameful to show your toes as a woman. The hair is no problem to them. So there are taqaleed in those issues. There are habits, social practices that influence what we consider right and wrong, right? Social. I used another example of social conditioning, remember? Facebook, in terms of addictions and that kind of thing, we talked about it, yes, but I used a specific example, I want to repeat it again, about monkeys, very good, the monkeys and the bananas. Who did not hear this example? It's so important that I want to repeat it. So the monkeys are taken, a group of monkeys, they're put in a cage. This is a scientific experiment, it's very well documented. It's in the field of social sciences, by the way. They take a group of monkeys, they put them in a cage, and they put a ladder in that cage. On top of the ladder, they have access from the top of the cage to put some bananas. And I have a photo in here that might be useful. So you can see on the left side, huh? So they put the bananas at the top of the ladder, and as soon as one of those monkeys starts to climb up to grab the bananas, a cold shower is doused on everybody. And very annoying to all the monkeys, and the water does not stop until they climb up and bring down that monkey, that sort of rebellious, greedy monkey. Yeah? Second day, the same thing. They notice that water stops when we bring down this guy. So they develop a rule not to allow anybody. They don't like these cold showers. So the third day, even if the monkey tries to go near the ladder, they stop him. And so on. After a while, they start replacing those monkeys, team number one, I call them, yeah, the first team of monkeys, one by one with new monkeys, one at a time. And the new monkey starts seeing the banana, I'm gonna go climb, seeing it. I don't know why you guys are not getting it, but there's banana up there. So he goes to go there, and then of course they stop him and yell at him, and no shower. And then they replace a second monkey and a third monkey, and all of them are behaving in exactly the same way, are being trained in that new rule that you cannot climb this ladder. If you climb this ladder, we're gonna have cold showers. Except the new monkeys don't know about the cold showers because there's no more water anymore. They're just training each other not to go near the ladder. And then they replace all of the monkeys with a new team. So now we have a brand new team of monkeys, right? They've never been subjected to cold water, but they follow these rules. And then they replace the second team of monkeys, one by one, with new members. So third team. And one by one, they learn that anytime you go near that ladder, they start yelling at you and grabbing you and not allowing you to climb up. And eventually they replace the whole second team with with new monkeys, and they follow in the same rule. And if you go ask that alpha monkey from the third generation, yes, from the third team, hey, wise one, why is it that we're not allowed to climb? What do you think he will say? Them are the rules, man, right? That's it. So the Quran describes it accurately in a very derogatory way. He accuses the unbelievers of falling into this trap. The unbelievers are described in the Quran by saying, "Inna wajadna aba'ana ala ummatin wa inna ala atharihim lamuqtadun." In another verse, lamuhtadun. We have found our forefathers doing it this way, and we're following, in their footsteps. In the second verse, they take pride. Wa inna ala atharihim lamuhtadun. This is the good guidance. They brag that this is good. Not only they follow and they don't know why, but they brag. They're muhtadun. So, obvious, right? So social indoctrination is very real, and we are subjected to it, and it does dysregulate our behavior. Correct? Okay. So, any questions about social, the social pathways? Okay, so I'm going to go back to the list. So we covered social, and the fourth one is personal history. And I talked a little bit about this, that when you are subjected to a certain event in your past, you develop a wound, you develop an area that becomes very touchy for you. And you try to avoid the pain that any new situation reminds you because of your past. So psychologists call this wound protection. I want to defend against my wound. It's like you have a scar and it still hurts. You try not to let anybody come close to it. So if you are hurt by, let's say, when you're a kid, you're hurt by a tall skinny kid, right? You may grow up to not like anybody who's tall and skinny, even when you're 40 years old, right? You may still have that sensitivity, and you act in ways that you may not understand unless you stop and think. Again, what am I showing you? I'm showing you that you may have motives for your behavior that are not necessarily pure, that are not necessarily pristine fitrah, pristine nature that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in you. So think about this and go back and analyze. Remember, by the way, that the whole purpose for these seminars that we're giving here, we're sharing with you, is not to apply them to other people. Please never take this out of your mind. All of this knowledge that I'm sharing with you is to practice on ourselves, is to be aware of what we are subjected to and try to cleanse ourselves, to do tazkiyah, to do development, to help ourselves get rid of the trash, of the stuff that's causing dysregulated behavior, and to bring us back to fitrah. Yeah? Okay, the second list, or how many different motives or different types of motives. We talked about the gut microbiota, and I may have shocked some of you by discussing how we're 90% non-human. I know this is annoying, I know this is strange, but it's true. Actually, it's more than 90%. In September this year, 2018, in Stanford, research was done. So it's not just microbes in our gut. It's also microbes on our skin. On your skin right now, there's microbes, and they're very healthy, and they love it, and they're helping you, and they're making sure you're protected from all sorts of different things. They're on your hair, in the private parts, they are there, and each one is different. Each group is different. Each society is different. But in September of this year, they did a study in Stanford, and they found that each one of us has a cloud surrounding us all the time, cloud of microbes that literally travels with us wherever we go. They call it the exposome. And so you're sitting next to your friend, be careful because your exposomes are, doing their thing right now. and you shouldn't find it strange because sometimes we say, you're in my private space, right? You're too close to me. You're annoying, whatever. Or we see that, for example, in families, certain behaviors or traits or characteristics run in families, right? And that's partly because the microbes are actually being shared via that mechanism, via the exposome. Why should we be surprised? Because, the flu virus, right? How is it shared? How is it communicated? Through the air, correct? So these things live in the air. But what's interesting and amazing is that this cloud is with you, goes with you to bed, wakes up with you in the morning, and goes to work, and there's exchanges, and they stay with you. They travel with you. They're not just floating in the air. They're actually somehow, and they don't understand how. So, what's the point? The point is the microbes affect our behavior. And we talked about a number of different detail last time, specifically that the microbes in our gut produce 90% of serotonin, which is the feel-good hormone. It's produced by our gut with the help of the microbes. So if the microbes inside our gut are not in a good, healthy state, we are lacking a lot of serotonin, and we get depressed, and we feel grumpy, and we feel angry, and we feel annoyed, and we're easily upset. Yes? All of these behaviors are not natural. If you had the right natural level of serotonin, you'd be a lot more mellow, a lot more even-tempered. So when you're angry and you're depressed, are you liable to behave in bad ways? Absolutely. Right? So this is dysregulated behavior. So paying attention to your microbiome, which is the healthy microbes in your gut, is very essential to protect your well-being, to protect your behavior, your fitra, and to protect you from falling into shirk. I come from a society, I'm telling you honestly, that it's very easy for someone to be swearing at God if you annoy them. If you cause them any kind of, they swear at God. Not at you, at God. So it's not just shirk, it's kufr. So this is very important. And of course, with our kids, sometimes we see misbehaving kids. They're not bad kids. They're just maybe having bad microbes in their stomach, in their intestines. So it's a health issue. It's not a behavior issue. And paying attention to it can help in a lot of these things. The point I'm making is that you are not as independent in your behavior as you think you are. A lot of these things affect you. Continuing. Any questions? We talked about glyphosate, which is really scary stuff, as I said last time. Thank you. Please, if you don't know about glyphosate, write it down and go do your research on this. Please, 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 do your research and investigate what it's doing to you without your being aware of it. A major leading researcher on this is Dr. Stephanie Seneff. And Dr. Anthony Samsel, excellent researchers dedicated to do this kind of work and provide very useful information. Okay, number 6, acquired parasites. We talked about Toxoplasma gondii. We talked about rabies. Rabies. You know what rabies is? What is rabies? Yes. Very good. How do you get it? How do you get it? You get it from a dog bite. So it's a parasite that lives inside the dog and causes the dog to behave in a wild, scary ways, and it runs after people and bites them. The reason the dog bites, even though normally that dog may not bite, but with that parasite, they start biting. Why? Because the parasite, the rabies parasite, wants to do what? To go to another person, to go to another animal. So they start biting as a way to transfer the parasite. It's not them who are choosing to do this. The parasite is making the dog do this. And they behave in wild ways. The human being who gets this and they get very sick and so on and so forth. So we know evidence where your behavior is affected by parasite, by something so small and so invisible. You don't know it's there, but it's there. Okay, cognitive biases. We talked about the many. We cited 188, and you're going to get this presentation, inshallah. We will share it with you. 188, at least so far, identified errors or follies in how we think, in how we think we're doing something, or we're saying something right, or we think we're thinking correctly, and it turns out to be totally false. I'll give you one example that I didn't share with you last time. Something called groupthink. How many people heard of that word, groupthink? Yes? Very good. Excellent. You know that movie? Wow, I'm impressed. I'm very impressed. Very, very few people know this. I used that movie in my training, actually. The name is 12 Angry Men. It's available for free on YouTube, by the way. It's a very old movie. You all should watch it. You all should watch it because I learned a lot for this presentation from that movie. It's a very beautiful movie, about an hour and 20 minutes or so. It's not very long. It's got Henry Fonda in it and big name actors, but very old. 12 Angry Men, okay? And it teaches you how you walk into, it's about jury in a trial against a kid who was accused of a murder. I'm so happy that you know this movie. This is excellent. Actually, all my kids, I make them sit and watch this movie. And whenever somebody asks me to, what are we going to do this evening? Let's do something fun. I pull up that movie and I have it on my laptop. So I just hook it up to the TV and watch it because it's very, very educational. So a jury of 12 people, they sit down to decide whether this kid has murdered his father. And the kid is, claiming innocence, and the evidence is overwhelmingly against him. But then the hero starts, initially the jury, 11 out of 12, vote guilty from the first minute, right? Guilty. Sorry? Don't ruin it for us. I can't ruin it for you because I told you the kid is not guilty, but the process of how he went through deconstructing the groupthink is very educational. So I'm going to stop here. You watch the rest of the movie. It's very good. I promise you. It's a very well spent time. Okay. So, groupthink. Groupthink in a community. Okay, we went to the event last night, right? Okay. If somebody walks in to an event like this, not necessarily this event, and say, Muslims have made a lot of mistakes and caused the current track of history to be not in their favor, out of their own doing. So in other words, he's making an accusation against a large group of people who all are thinking we are right. Yes? You get the example, right? So there's a group of people who all together collectively think we are correct. In Al-Furqa Najiyah, they call it, the group who is going to be saved on the Day of Judgment. We are from that group. We are saved because we have an identity card that says I am a Muslim. Okay? So if somebody makes a critique of that group, it's going to be very hard for one person to stand up from that group and say you are correct. Why? Because of the groupthink, majority. They call it in social sciences or political science the oppression of the majority. Yes? The oppression of the majority. That's groupthink. Okay, so take it into a board meeting now. Take it into a board meeting, executive board meeting. And they're discussing something and they say, no, this person, said something bad about Islam. We should never have him come and speak to our community. And the second person say, yeah, you're correct. And the third person, But then one person say, well, he said something against our community, but he was correct in saying it. He was critiquing us for our own benefit, to help us. No, he's a bad person, blah, blah, blah. And then that minority voice gets overwhelmed by the groupthink, by the majority. Make sense? So in Battle of Uhud, before the battle, Prophet ﷺ did not want to go to war. But the majority groupthink was, we beat them last time in Badr, we can do it again. So the Prophet had to go along with it. Groupthink. Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had set the course of history to go that way. And that's fine. But I'm talking about human beings, how human beings think. We are subject to groupthink. So what I teach when I teach leadership, anytime you have a group of people, the leader's job is to, in his mind, develop what's called a bell curve. You know what the bell curve is? It's a statistics curve that that peaks right in the middle and then kind of goes down flat on the sides. That's called the bell curve because it looks like a bell, jaras, bell curve. Majority of people are in the middle, in the 80% in the middle. Majority of people, majority of your team, majority of your community, majority of your society are in this 80% in the middle. And they have similar opinions, 60%, 80%, somewhere in the middle. There's always these, these outliers on the plus side and on the negative side, right? The 10% on this side and the 10% on this side. What I teach leaders all the time is that's where the nuggets of wisdom is. It's on these sides, not in the middle. Not in the middle. If you always follow, وَإِن تتبع, Quran teaches us this. وَإِن تتبع كثيرا من الناس يضلوك عن سبيل الله. If you follow the majority of people, they will lead you astray. Quran teaches us this. Yes?
It sounds like the democratic process which goes by the highest.
I didn't say anything, but you make your own conclusion. No. Not necessarily. You see, the democratic process works really well when you don't have misinformation and disinformation. The problem we have right now is that we have disinformation and misinformation. So the democratic process has been broken for a long time. And I'm not just saying this. Listen to Noam Chomsky, listen to the big major scholars who talk about these issues, and they're all over the place. So we're not saying any secrets or any, hush-hush, nobody's supposed to know this. No, everybody knows this. My college-age daughter knows this. And she talks to me all the time about this. And they talk about it in college. Democracy has been broken because of this information. When you have a president who is, railing against journalists all the time and accusing them of being bad people, evil people, nasty people, this and that, right? What is he trying to do? He's trying to make sure the journalists do not present the truth. He doesn't like that. So he's killing the messenger because he doesn't like the message that these journalists are supposed to deliver. Right? So it's misinformation, not democracy. So anyway, back to the bell curve. وَإِن تُطِعْ أكثر الناس يضلوك عن سبيل الله. If you follow the majority, they will mislead you. They will lead you astray. Be careful. That's called groupthink. We call it with a scientific name. But the Quran teaches us, this is the truth. وَمَا أَكْثَرُ النَّاسِ وَلَوْ حَرَصْتَ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ. The majority of people, even if you are dedicated to invite them, they will not be believers. In Surah Yusuf, وَمَا أَكْثَرُ النَّاسِ in Surah Yusuf, وَمَا أَكْثَرُ النَّاسِ وَلَوْ حَرَصْتَ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ. The majority will not be believers. And then 2 verses later, it says something else. وَمَا يُؤْمِنُ أَكْثَرُهُمْ بِاللَّهِ إِلَّا وَهُمْ مُشْرِكُونَ. This is scary. Majority of them, even if they believe, they are mushrik. So the first half, the first majority is what? Unbelievers, right? How much is that statistically? Let's say 51%. Majority, right? So the second verse says, even of those who believe, the majority of them is what? Mushrikun. They commit shirk. You see why this is so important? Are we potentially part of that group? Inshallah, no. Inshallah, no. But we really need to be careful. What is causing our behavior to be leaning in the direction of shirk? All of these things, be aware of them. Don't allow yourself to be led, to be misled, to be made into a slave to somebody else's whims and desires. Hawa. Okay, this is a fun one. I'm going to change tone a little bit and talk about common sense, which is number 8. So where are we here? We talked about the gut microbiome. Talked about parasites. Talked about Toxoplasma gondii. By the way, the parasites, the reason I mentioned parasites and microbes, this is something I didn't talk about last time. There's a new field in science called synthetic biology. Synthetic biology. About 3 months ago, there was a report by a bunch of scientists objecting to the United States military trying to develop insects, new types of insects that carry special viruses, and they can be released. And the scientists are saying, not my words, the scientists were saying, we are worried that the military is going to use these as a form of biological weapons. There was again, go look it up, don't believe me. There is something called the gay bomb. The gay bomb, B-O-M-B. That was actually researched by the military. What is the purpose? They throw this bomb, but then it doesn't kill people. It turns the soldiers, for a brief amount of time, into gays. Yes, I'm not joking. It's weird stuff. They can actually do this. And of course, they did not pursue the project, or that's what we were told. They developed other types of behavioral bombs. It's funny stuff, but it's also scary stuff. So, something like this falls in the wrong hands. Just think. Has it already fallen in the wrong hands? Is it being used without us knowing it? Okay. So that's what synthetic biology is. It's about developing these types of things that, on purpose, trying to change people's behavior on purpose, on a mass scale. And I'm not talking about just advertising and marketing. I'm talking about physical, microbes that actually get into you and cause you to do this. May Allah protect our kids. Wallahi, may Allah protect our kids. Because we have lived so far, we think we are safe, but Allahu A'lam what's going to happen to the future generations. Yes?
Just for your information, last week or so I was walking I was driving close to San Diego Coastal Road, and I saw a company named Synthetic Genomics.
You know what that is?
I don't know, but it relates like what you were saying.
Yes.
People are working on.
Yes. There is a machine called CRISPR. CRISPR. C-R-I-S-P-R. Without the E. Look it up. Don't believe me. Go look it up. It's, you know how a word processor allows you to modify a file? You type in, it modifies the file. CRISPR allows you to modify the DNA to create new species. Absolutely. So, for example, some of the broccoli that we eat right now, its DNA has been modified to include genes from a pig. That's the technology we're talking about, synthetic DNA. They're talking about creating the insects I just mentioned. They're new creatures. They were not created before. So there's not a modification of an existing insect. It's a brand new type of virus they want to use. So there is a whole field right now. It's very hot. It's very popular among people who want money from government research grants and so on and so forth. Yes. تفضل. About CRISPR. طب تفضل احكي من هون. مشان التسجيل.
From nature. So CRISPR is actually a technique that bacteria uses, or viruses uses, to change the DNA in its host. So we're just adopting what nature have already given us, what God have already given us. So we took that tool and we used it in our hand to change the DNA in a living human being. Now we can change DNA. We've been doing that for a long time and introducing it to broccoli and all that stuff. The trick here, I'm sick. Let's say I'm sick. I have a genetic defect. Can you do something about it? No, you can't. Well, now you can. You can introduce that viral tool, into my body, and it will go to every cell of my body and fix that genetic defect. There's a huge benefit from that. But like any other thing in life, you have to know how and when and what rules and regulations to use it.
Just 1 second, let me take the question from the sister. تفضلي. No, I'm not going to answer that question. No. But this is not the subject of this. I'm just telling you that there is research that was presented to cause that behavior modification. Now you're asking to go backward. Is the origin of that biological or not? It's not something we want to discuss here. Yeah. طيب. Thank you, Brother Mahmoud, for the explanation. So it makes sense, right? But you see the point that it is definitely it's got the potential to cause behavioral changes. Yes? Okay, common sense. This is more fun. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions here. Please don't read on the left. From what to what?
From the feather of the hen or chicken. They are making nuggets in 2 days. So
Chicken nuggets?
they want to stop killing animals, basically.
Well, there's always, see, this is the thing. With every new technology humans have introduced, at least in the last couple of 100 years, there's always a good intention. Somebody says the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? So, again, we're going through all of these things to wake you up, to cause you to think, to cause you to search and learn and reflect and be aware of its potential. That's all my interest here. Yes? So, you take a piece of paper. Take a piece of paper with me, and you start folding it in half, and half again. We're talking about common sense now. So this is an exercise. No, don't do it. You're not going to be able to get it done. But I'm saying, imagine you take a piece of paper, a very large piece of paper, and you fold it in half. And you fold it in half again, on itself again. So how many times so far? 3. Another time, 4. Another time, 5. How many times do you need to fold it so that it reaches, the thickness of it, become between here and the moon? Give me a number, it's okay. You understand the question, right? So I take a piece of, I'm talking about common sense now. How our common sense is so inadequate sometimes. And between here and the moon, I apply, the paper, right? This paper, whatever. Let's imagine so now I folded it, right? So now it's this thick. So I fold it again. Now it's this thick. With me? So this is twice, right? 3rd time. So it's this thick. Now 4th time. It's this thick. 5 times. This thick, and so on. If I keep doing this, imagine it's a big piece of paper. Yeah, don't take the calculator now. I know you can do this using the calculator. I'm talking about common sense. Give me a number.
I think I'm not going to give you the number, but
No, I need a number so we can keep moving.
I cannot do the number. But what I'm thinking is every time you are doubling it,
Very good. That's exactly the point.
doubling means you are adding
Okay.
100% more.
Don't ruin the exercise now. Seriously, how many times? I need a number. Give me a number. Don't worry about it.
Even a couple of hundred will make it.
200.
I guess
400. 465. So to make the steps. Any number. 50 trillion times of folding. How about Brother Farouk? You're an engineer. Give me a number. So the answer is about 51 times. 51 only. Not 51,000 or 51 million. Only 51 times. And the formula is very simple. It's 2 to the power 51. You just multiply, because every time you're doubling it. So 2 to the power 51 times. You find it's the distance of, I can't remember, 156,000 miles or something like that, based on the thickness of the paper. So is this something our common sense can grasp? No way. You can't. You can't really, but it's true. Put it on the calculator and try it at home tonight and you'll find this is the number. So our common sense is not necessarily a good guide. Sometimes distrust your common sense because it misleads you. And by the way, a lot of people try to mislead our common sense. Read the last one. Eating saturated fat can make you fat. It turns out to be totally scientifically wrong. Totally wrong. Has nothing to do with it. It's common sense. Everybody knows this. Eating fat makes you fat. Turns out it's the exact opposite. Fat actually helps you get rid of fat. It's the sugars and the carbohydrates and those kinds of things that make you fat. You don't like me, I know you don't like me, but it's true. It's absolutely true. So this is common sense that has, and by the way, where did this come from? Eating fat makes you fat. It actually came from a scientist named Axel Keys, who lived in the 1950s in Minnesota. Sorry. And he is the one who started promoting that concept, that it's the fat. It's a saturated fat that causes people heart attacks and make you fat, and cholesterol, all of this stuff, and it turns out to be absolutely not true. 50 years later, now scientists know for a fact that this is not true. I really don't want to discuss this because but the point is, yes, but the point is, eating fat does not make you fat. That's all I'm trying to say. Okay? Of course, if you eat buckets of fat, that's a different story. You introduce calories and you become fat, of course. But just the fact that you're eating fat, that's not the cause of being fat. Okay. So another example of what? Of common sense not making sense. It turns out that this common sense did not make sense. I explained before that the skin area, the area of our skin, is the size approximately of this rug, right? About 2 square meters, human skin. The inside skin, what is the inside skin? The intestines and the digestive tract, right? So if you take the intestines, how long are the intestines? About 30 feet approximately, yes? The intestines. If you take the intestines, stretch them, and inside the intestines there are these villi, the little fingers, right? Inside the walls of the intestines. And the surface area of all of these, if you compute the total surface area inside our intestines, it's actually the size of a tennis court, 2,100 square feet. Why? Because we have a lot of things to do with every bite that we take. Again, common sense doesn't always register this. Imagine, I tell you, you have the surface of a tennis court inside you. Get out of here. It's true. Okay, so we talked about folding the paper. Take a gram of charcoal. You know how much a gram of charcoal is? Charcoal, regular, fahm, you know? Its surface area is 2,000 square meters. Inside this, you know, because the surface area of the charcoal, meaning every molecule that is separated from its sister molecules, has a surface area. So if you compute the surface area of all of these molecules inside 1 gram, it's equivalent to 2,000 square meters. That's why you take a little bit of charcoal and it absorbs a lot of negative stuff from inside your intestines. Right? They use charcoal to absorb oil and all sorts of things. Because there's a lot of inside, there's a lot of surface area where it can suck up a lot of these things. Common sense doesn't always lead us correctly. So, why am I telling you this about this inside this presentation? Because if I'm able to make something common sense, then I've just controlled your behavior. Yes? So how do I do this? How do we make something common sense? If I have a lie that I want people to be convinced of, what do I have to do? Keep repeating it. Keep repeating it, keep repeating it, keep repeating it. Eventually people start believing it. And not only believe it, like the monkeys, it passes on from generation to generation. It becomes common sense. Everybody knows this. Everybody knows this. Okay, let's continue because time is running out. So another common sense, funny stuff. Human beings, I don't know how many of you know this, but until about 150 years ago, you know, your shoes, you have now left shoe and right shoe, right? When you go to the shoe store, do you buy a pair of shoes that look exactly the same? No, there's a right shoe and the left shoe. Well, until 150 years ago, human beings did not do this. All of our shoes were exactly the same. This is how limited we are. When I heard this the first time, I laughed so much. We are so, I mean, you look down at your feet, you see it. There's no way to escape it. Yes? But only 150 years ago, we manufactured shoes that are different right and left. It's true. You look amazed, but it's absolutely true. This is how limited the human beings are. Now, I'm going to ask you a tough question. If somebody is bringing me a tradition, Islamic tradition, from 500 years ago, or 1,000 years ago, should I accept it blindly? Makes sense now, right? You understand? Because those scholars know, you know, without any belittling of their scholarship and their dedication and their commitment, at the end of the day, they were human beings that were subject to what? To all of these factors. All of these factors. Were they subject to groupthink? Absolutely. Were they subject to biological influences that may have affected what they see as right or wrong? Absolutely. That's why you find a great, tremendous, beautiful, wonderful scholar, Abu Hamid Ghazali. When you read his writings about women and the rights of women, it's horrible. I cannot discuss it in front of, you know, someone I want to invite to Islam. Beautiful scholar in so many different ways. You know, he's a polymath. You know what a polymath is? Allama. He knows so many sciences. Philosophy and logic and fiqh and hadith and Quran and Arabic and poetry and medicine and, you know. But when it comes to treatment of women, just terrible stuff. So this is why we have to be awake and not allow this space in our mind to be given away for free to anybody who wants to dump stuff in it, to avoid shirk. Because if I behave according to what Imam al-Ghazali says with my wife, I would be tyrannical, I would be oppressive to my wife. And if I teach my kids to behave that way, I would be passing it on just like those monkeys. Am I committing shirk? You bet I am. You bet I am. Because I'm oppressing my wife, and shirk is oppression. We talked about this last time. So this is not a joke. You're not absolved of your responsibility to be aware of these influences on you. You cannot behave like those little free, statutes. We talked about this a little earlier. They sell you these, or you see the photo, right? 3 monkeys, one covering their eyes, one covering their ears, one covering their mouth. You can't behave that way. Islam is difficult. Islam is for the awake, not for the lazy person who just wants to follow blindly. And Islam teaches you not to be lazy and not to follow blindly. And that's what submission to the Creator alone means. Another common sense Prophet teaches us, "Sumu tasahhu." Fast and you shall be cured. Fast. How many have heard this expression before? Sumu tasahhu. In the Arab world, we all are taught this. When I first came here in 1982 to the United States, and then I got into da'wah, and then I was asked to go talk about Islam to churches and high schools and so on and so forth. When I got to talk about Ramadan, coming from my background, sumu tasahhu. So I said, fast and you shall be cured. I was literally laughed out, almost out of the room. I was literally laughed out of the room. They almost kicked me out. They were laughing at me. It turns out that fasting is the best cure ever discovered so far. Not my words. Look up again on the internet if you want, Dr. Jason Fung, F-U-N-G. Or no, he's actually American in Canada. Yeah, I'm coming to that. Yes. A Japanese scientist who got the Nobel Prize in 2016 for something called autophagy. A-U-T-O. Please write it down and look it up. A-U-T-O-P-H-A-G-E. MashaAllah. Wallahi, I'm so happy you're here. What's your name? Mustafa. Very good. I'm so impressed that people know this. Autophagy. What's autophagy? Autophagy is a process inside the cell. So imagine the cell. The cell has a garbage disposal process called autophagy. It gets activated when you're fasting. It does not get activated unless you're fasting. It's called autophagy. And by the way, when it cleans itself up, it's very healthy again, it starts looking in the neighborhood. Hey, you look sick. So first it does a flag. It puts a flag on the sick neighboring cell. If the immune system cannot take it, cannot get rid of it, the healthy one comes and eats it. So autophagy is eating oneself, the body eating oneself. He won the Nobel Prize for discovering this process. Our Prophet ﷺ said exactly the same thing. As a matter of fact, we knew this. If an animal, your cat or your dog or your horse, or if they get sick, what do? They stop eating. That's the first thing they do. So common sense doesn't make sense here, but scientifically it's true. Sumu tasahhu. So this was not taught to us as common sense. It is revelation. Remember we talked about revelation and the importance of trusting revelation? This was revelation. What the Quran tells us in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَأَن تَصُومُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. To fast is much better for you, if you only knew. So this is not wahm, imagination. This is revelation. And revelation is a lot more accurate most of the time, true revelation, right? Because there is some fake revelation, meaning, people who claim or told us a story that turns out to be not a true story about the Prophet. But true revelation is always more accurate than science, because it's coming from the one who actually set the scientific rules into motion, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your filter, your kidneys, these little tiny, the size of this kidneys, how many liters of liquid do they filter every single day? 180 liters. Can you imagine this? If I tell you I invented a filter that goes through 180, about this size, 180 liters a day without your being aware of it, without your, you don't have a battery for it, you don't have anything, no wires and nothing. It just works by itself. Again, the mind cannot get its head around it. And this is a lot of fun. Mosquitoes. You know the mosquitoes? The front part, the part that actually pierces your skin, it's called the proboscis. Proboscis. It's actually like a straw. Yes? Inside that straw, there are 6 different things. 6. First, there are 2, they call them the shears, like scissors. They're like serrated knives. You know the knives that you cut the steak with? There are 2 of those. And its purpose is to make the cut, the incision inside your skin. 2 of those. So this is all inside the trunk, the little straw that comes out from the mouth of the mosquitoes. 2 sheaths to cut the skin. So it cuts it and it keeps it open like this. And then a third instrument comes in to taste the blood. Before it does this, by the way, there's another instrument that numbs the skin. So the first thing it does, it numbs your skin. That's why you're looking at it, but you can't feel it. That's why it doesn't wake you up at night. The wings wake you up at night. But if it comes, on your skin, you can't sense it. Because first thing it does, it numbs the skin. And then it takes its time. So it cuts. The fourth one tastes the blood. If you're the wrong blood type, it doesn't want you. It just moves away. If it likes it, then it injects with the number 5 now, right? With number 5. It injects a solution to make your blood thin. To thin your blood. Amazing. Wallahi amazing. Wallahi, it's absolutely amazing. And then at the end, there's number 6, which is the final sucking instrument. 6 instruments in that one proboscis. Can your head get around this? Can a human being invent a tool like this right now, today? We can't. It's impossible. So if somebody went during the days of the Prophet ﷺ and told them, this is the greatness of the mosquito that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using the example of it in the Quran. This is one example. Would they have believed the Prophet if he said this? No way. Why do you think the Prophet did not do tafsir on the Quran? Because if he did, they would have called him even more, names than they called him actually in his life. You with me? It's truly fascinating. It tells you how our limited brain is like what Brother Mahmoud taught me yesterday and the day before. It's like a very thirsty man walking in the desert. If you give him a bucket of water, they drown. You have to give them a little bit at a time. So we're all like that. Beautiful example. Thank you. So the Quran has all of this information, right? But we can only accept a little bit at a time. So therefore, every few years, there's a new discovery that confirms what the Quran said. Every additional few years, another discovery, and so on and so forth. And that's why we don't have a tafsir from the Prophet ﷺ, B, a complete tafsir ever. We're not going to have a complete tafsir. So the Quran project that I talked about is a translation and a few notes based on what we know today. In 50 years, it'll be redone. It needs to be redone. Because we will know a lot more. So anybody who comes and tells you, misinform you, that the tafsir says this and this, what do? No, only Allah knows the tafsir. So there's somebody's commentary on it. Yes, I accept this. Somebody's notes or somebody's inspiration from one verse. I totally accept this. Does it lock up the meaning of that verse? Absolutely not. Because if you tell me that somebody knows the full tafsir of the Quran, that means astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, he had brought God and put him in a box. to the level of a human brain, which is the same brain that 150 years ago did not know that we need a separate foot on the left from a separate foot on the right. That's how limited and simpleton we have been in our history, and chances are we still are. So now we just recognize it a little bit better. So this is where science leads us. So therefore, back to the epistemology. Do you remember the epistemology I talked about? What is epistemology? I'm going to ask questions because you're starting to look sleepy. I'm going to ask questions. Let's see, who was here? The brother in the blue in the back with the glasses. Yes, what's epistemology? Very good. A branch of philosophy that teaches us to analyze how we know what we know. How do we ascertain the truth, the validity, the veracity, the accuracy of what we think we know? Yes? So, I've eliminated our senses as Imam Ghazali did. We cannot trust the senses. We cannot trust the mind. Common sense is eliminated. Science, I've proven that science, we'll talk a little bit more about it. I may not get into it, so let me talk about it a little bit. Science, by the way, as I said already, science is a tool to help us on the way, not necessarily the end. So science is not necessarily a fully reliable source of epistemology, right? So what are we left with? Look what the Quran says. Say subhanallah when you hear this verse. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يُجَادِلُ فِي اللَّهِ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ وَلَا هُدًى وَلَا كِتَابٍ مُنِيرٍ. Beautiful epistemology of everything. Among men are people who argue the creation of God. They don't dare argue the nature of God, the essence of God. Fillah, meaning in what He created. They argue about the creation of God. Without what? Without three things. بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ, no science or knowledge. وَلَا هُدًى, no guidance from someone who's teaching them, or وَلَا كِتَابٍ مُنِيرٍ, no revealed, illuminating book. So at the top is what? The book. Because you start with the little, and then you say, I don't even have money to pay my gas for the car, let alone buy the car, right? So the increase is after. So the top of the pyramid is Kitab Munir, and that's what the Quran is. Revelation. And I'm showing you that we are so easily misled. Our mind is so easily abused. Our behavior is so easily dysregulated that at the end of the day, we are left asking, Ya Allah, what do we do? So I'm going to skip a few other things in the interest of time because we're almost to the end. There's intentional indoctrination. Let me talk about this just a little bit. Here's a couple of examples that are really interesting. If they've done a study, you know what prisoners, people who are in prison, in jail, they call them incarcerated, right? The people who are incarcerated, they come up for parole. And they did a study if there was a way to predict what the parole judge is going to do. You know what they found? The answer is up there, don't look. They found that the best indicator whether or not a judge is going to grant parole to a prisoner, you know what it is? How long it's been, or how little it's been since he last ate food. So if it's been 4 or 5 hours, chances are he's not going to grant parole. If it is right after lunch, he's very generous and he's going to grant parole. I'm not making it up. It's experiments. The person who talks about this is Robert Sapolsky from Stanford, professor of psychology. So the biggest indicator of whether or not you're going to get la samahallah, if you end up in jail and you need to get, parole, insist on an appointment right after the lunch for the judge. They did some studies. They gave them surveys that they give people surveys that try to indicate whether or not you're a liberal person or a conservative person. They found that by putting some garbage, that smelly garbage, in the room, the majority of people became more conservative in their answers. Changes behaviors, and you're not even aware of it. Another example is what's called anchoring. So I want to sell you a kitchen. And if you try this with good salespeople, you find they use it all the time, without even you're aware of it. I want to sell you a kitchen. The kitchen is worth about $15,000. But I want to sell it to you for $40,000. Then I go and tell you, next time your husband buys a Lexus, madam, remind him that a kitchen is much, much less expensive than a Lexus. All of a sudden, the Lexus is worth $60,000, right? She knows that. Every woman knows that. Now, her job is to be confident that, hey, a Lexus is going to last 5 years, my kitchen is going to last 20 years. And I spend a lot more time in my kitchen than you spend in your Lexus. So the salesman just completed the sale. It's called anchoring. I throw in an unrelated, and sometimes you're not aware of it. Anybody has seen the latest logo for Wendy's? Okay. Next time you drive by Wendy's, or you see their commercials on TV, pay attention to their logo. At the bottom of the logo, they have what? M-O-M. Mom. Subconscious, anchoring that our food is as good as your mom's food. Hopefully your mom's food is good. But the majority of people think their mom's food is the best, right? They literally have it spelled in a weird way, and if you're not paying attention, your brain is registering it. It's called anchoring. It's affecting what you think by something subconsciously they expose you to before you made the decision. By the way, these commercials are running a lot, and if they did not make a lot of sense to Wendy's and they were not profitable, guess what? They would not have run them. Because they run through pilot tests and pilot studies before deciding to invest that much money in advertising. And there are many, many other examples like this. It's called anchoring. If you want to read more about this is an excellent, excellent book. It's called Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely. He's currently a professor at Duke University. You all know about Pavlov. Pavlov, anybody heard of Pavlov's dog? It's fun. They bring this dog and they put food, and the dog starts to salivate. And next time they ring the bell when they put the food. So the dog starts associating the bell with the food, and the dog starts salivating. And eventually, anytime they ring the bell, even with no food, the dog starts salivating. Yes? A friend of mine was telling me that when she's not hungry at all, she's on this new diet that I recommended for her. And she says, I'm not hungry at all, I can go for 2-3 days if I want to without food. Because she switched to fat burning, which literally doesn't require food. She says, except when I start cooking, I immediately get hungry. She's a really good cook. So women maybe know this. I love cooking, and I can tell you, I get hungry when I decide I want to cook. If I tell myself I'm not going to cook, I don't have the time, I'm not hungry. When I decide to start cooking, I become really hungry, because your body starts getting used to the concept that you're going to get some food, so the insulin is going to go up, and then it's all automatic stuff. It just happens without you're aware of it. So this is the Pavlovian dog. we're all subject to that phenomenon. Okay, let's see what else. We talked about the story of the sheikh yesterday. The sheikh, the shifting intentions. Who was not here yesterday to hear the story? Okay, should we repeat it? Yeah, you can watch it on YouTube. It's the very end of the YouTube that's already, the segment that's already on YouTube. I promise you it's good. This is about marketing behavior and so on. I talked about the next concept. Inshallah. Yeah. So I'm going to try to wrap it very soon, inshallah. I talked about paradigms in the khutbah. For those of you who attended the khutbah, you heard me talk about the elephant. The elephant. We're all subject to this, by the way. We're all subject to this. So it's very similar to the dog, to the Pavlovian dog. You know, you create a mental frame in the mind of the person. So basically, they bring elephants to the circus. How do they tie them? How do they restrict them? Because the elephant is very big, right? No cage can hold the elephant. So they bring the baby elephant, they tie its leg, and they train it, you know, with a very hard chain. They tie its leg with a very, very big chain. And there's no way the baby elephant can break. And over time, it gets used to this chain. I'm staying here. They replace the chain with a simple rope, a regular rope, which he can easily break. And the elephant grows, and he never attempts to break that paradigm, to break that shackle. So it's mental shackle. Okay, solutions. I think I gave you a lot of solutions already, but let me summarize a few things. We are hopeless. This is the solution. And if you don't believe me yet, then I don't know what else I can tell you. We literally are hopeless. We are weak-minded. We are easily controllable. Sometimes we do a lot of things that we think we're in control of ourselves. In reality, we're not. Question is, does Allah know this? Does Allah know this? The answer is yes. Does that absolve you of your responsibility? Does that mean you have no responsibility? What do you think? Why do you say no? Why do you think you still have responsibility? In the back. Yeah. Excellent. This is exactly right. So remember the three monkeys? One of them is doing this, one of them is doing this, one of them is doing this. If you're one of those claiming that you have no responsibility because it's outside your control, you're just like those three monkeys. And Allah did not create you like those three monkeys. He created you to be able to speak, to be able to hear, and to be able to see. Correct? So you cannot sit back and say, well, we are so weak, we are so feeble, this is uncontrollable, so what the heck? That, now you're entering the territory of shirk. Because as long as you know about somebody giving you, remember I used the example, somebody giving you a little bit of drugs every day to cause your behavior to be weird, when you become aware that you're subjected to these things and you don't do anything about it, now you have decided to give up your humanity. You've decided to be like that elephant, unaware of the fact that there's really no chain. I'm telling you, and the world, and you know already, there are no chains. So it's up to you to be aware of these things, to refuse to subject yourself to these things, and to always constantly do tazkiyah. What's tazkiyah? Development. To develop yourself. How do you develop yourself? By learning what is shackling you and releasing it. And it's all up here. Some of it is biological also, as I showed you. Some of it is social. So you ask yourself, what is my social context teaching me to do? And is this something that's good, that would please Allah or not? You have to ask these questions. You cannot do this or this. You can't. If you believe in radical monotheism as Islam teaches it, remember, radical means root. Yes? Islam is not for the lazy. And your children depend on you to pass this message. Our society depends on us to pass this message, to defend the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because all of these things are helping to do what to the human being? What are these things helping to do to the human being? The words of Allah, the message from Allah. To free him up, right? To become more free, less of a led animal or misled animal. So it is in their own benefit. That's why Islam is mercy to mankind. Because human beings are subject, without knowing, to all of these influences. The people who use these influences are soldiers of shaitan. Soldiers of shaitan. Our job is to wake people up. So you cannot say, I don't know this, and I'm going to remain quiet. And by the way, this is not my responsibility. If I'm not aware of it, then it's okay. I'll tell you a true story. A man who used to work in Saudi Arabia was cheated out of hundreds of thousands of riyal. In contract, he's supposed to receive it. The owner, he went to his manager, says, no, you don't have the right for it, blah, blah, blah. Well, there's a contract, no. So he decided to go to the very top guy, the owner. True story. He went to the owner. The owner had a Twitter account, and every day, ayah, Quran, verses of Quran, story about a good person, beautiful icons and pictures of Islam, haram, every single day. So this employee went to the owner. He says, look, this is my contract, and my manager is refusing to pay. And the owner says, I don't interfere in the decisions of my managers. That's totally up to him. I believe in full delegation, and I trust him to do the right thing, and that's not my job to do his job for him. Get it? Is that excusable? Absolutely not. So if it applies to us, it's the same thing. Is it excusable? No. Is it excusable to not wake up our kids in this society who are subjected to this even more? No. We have to spend time, not be lazy about this, and be courageous. First you admit that I am possibly a victim of all of these things. That's the first thing you admit. I'm a victim. Second, I'm not going to be a victim. I'm going to try to free myself of the shackles that are limiting my behavior. And third, you become a soldier. Soldier of what? Soldier of truth. That means you start helping people around you. Remember the autophagy, that cell that eats itself, cleans itself and starts eating its neighbor? You have to do autophagy in your own community, in your own society. Society at large. You clean yourself up, and you start cleaning all around you. We have to do autophagy. I like this concept that Islam teaches us to do autophagy. I have a 15-minute left, and there are lots of things that we can talk about, so I'm going to stop here and take questions or comments or whatever else you want to. I talked about science, I talked about most of the things that are left, and you're going to have the presentation, inshallah. So we asked, are we really free? The answer is not truly free, but we can be free. Or we can attain to be free, yes? We can attain to be free. We have a horizon of freedom. You follow me? Truly, we are not free because we are subjected to dysregulated behavior. I convinced you of this, right? So we're not truly 100% free. But can we attain to be more free than we are today or we were yesterday? The answer is yes. You've taken the first step right now. By being here, by watching this, you have taken the first step of trying to unshackle your mind and cleanse your body and eliminate a lot of the effects. So we can attain to be free. Okay, so there's still a delta, right? Between how free we are and where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will hold us accountable. And Allah knows. That's why we need God's mercy. That's why it's not our deeds that will get us into Jannah. It is dedication to Allah and how hard we work, and Allah will show us the way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's a beautiful verse in the Quran. Please memorize it. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَيُعَلِّمُكُمُ اللَّهُ. When you have God consciousness, Allah will teach you. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ, say with me. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَيُعَلِّمُكُمُ اللَّهُ. When you have true commitment to have consciousness and God consciousness is obvious, right? To be aware of oneself. God consciousness, Allah will lead you in the right direction, will teach you. So we need mercy from Allah. We need to fall back on revelation and do taslim. Remember we talked about taslim being the opposite of shirk. We need to educate ourselves. And we need to be teaching people all around us that these things are important and wake them up. Keep waking them up. Don't, you see somebody asleep, being drugged, being, you know what I mean, being drugged. And the example I used, somebody giving you, a little bit of drugs every day. So somebody in your mind is living that type of life, help waking them up. Earn the designation that Allah uses you to help somebody else. In the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, إِذَا أَرَادَ اللَّهُ بِعَبْدٍ خَيْرًا اسْتَعْمَلَهُ. If God wants something good for a human being or a wayfarer, He uses him. So be among those that Allah uses for such purpose. Questions? Very good. تفضل. أحسن.
Just a general question, really. Is there any way to quantify any of those triggers in relation to the conscious mind? How much do they affect in percentage or in value towards me?
So is there any way to quantify any of those factors? And the answer is yes. Quantify in the sense that how much does it gauge it? Very good. How much does it really affect us? So I talked about glyphosate yesterday. Those of you who were here, this evil Roundup herbicide that they spray on everything, and we're all ingesting it. It's very scary stuff. Very scary stuff. Is that affecting us? You bet. I would say, scientifically, everything that you ingest stays in 80%. So is everybody affected the same way? Probably not, because there are genes and DNAs and differences and so on. My personal estimate, I'll give you a scary statistic, really scary statistic. Glyphosate has been linked to autism. Direct link. Listen to this. 30 years ago, 40 years, in the late 70s, there were statistics done. They used to find one autistic child out of 36,000. One per 36,000. You know what the rates are today? The curve is exponential, going up. It's 1 per 50 today. You know what it's going to be in 2030? Based on the curve. 1 out of 2. Scary or not? Don't believe me, go search for it. Go look it up. Read it. This is directly linked to glyphosate. It's very scary stuff and affects your behavior. So here's a question. What do we do to wake people up that this is really damaging for their profits? It's causing our health to go down. What do we do? Is this da'wah? Even if I don't talk about Islam, this is da'wah. Just like Yusuf alayhi salam made da'wah to the whole community, by teaching them how to deal with the drought that was coming, right? We didn't know if, we were not told, were they Muslims or non-Muslims? Did they become Muslims afterwards? It did not matter. He was a prophet from Allah. The purpose for him was what? To save people during a drought that was coming. This is a disaster in the works. I just told you about autism. There are 190 diseases, including cancers, all types of cancers. This is really scary stuff going on, and we cannot afford to stay lazy. We cannot afford to stay in our own comfortable cocoon and say, yeah, it's not my job. Okay. First, we need to produce what I'm working on and make it more public. This is the first thing, because if I wasn't able to receive support from somebody to bring me here so that you can hear me, you would not receive this. So imagine if I can deliver the same message to 10,000 or 10 or 100,000 more people. That's the most important part. Become a soldier of truth, correct? So I need your support, and I'm not going to let you off the hook, because I delivered the message to you, and I showed you how serious it is. And if you go sleep without being able to help, I leave it between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I hope that you help me, because we need all as Muslims to do this. This is not the job of one person. It's like Brother Mahmoud said a little earlier, 2 weeks ago, I was at his, with his beautiful father, may Allah, give him health. And he says this is the work of states. I agree. This is countries that need to do this. But we don't have countries. Let's face it, right? Do we have countries? Would we be here if we had real countries? I don't want to be here if I didn't have a real country. If I had a real country, who would want to leave his mother and his uncles and his brothers and come into a foreign land like most of us are? Some of us are converts. Some of us are born here, but the vast majority of Muslims are immigrants. So the point is, by the way, I have another project. And some of you know about this. So I have 3 things that I do in my life almost full time. The first one is this Quran project, including these lectures, which you notice that I bring science, modern knowledge about the Quran, and bring them together. Because to me, this is Islam. Islam is not just one side of life and forgetting about everything else. No, Islam is life. Okay, so that's the first project. Translating the Quran, doing these YouTubes, and doing the commentary on the Quran, which some people, as I said, have supported me to come here in front of you. But they can't support me, so I have to travel back in 5 days. So we need support. So the second project is a group on Facebook in Arabic to take all of the knowledge about nutrition that I discussed and a lot more and translate it for the Arabic people about what's going on in nutrition, to educate them, to give them more information, because they have health problems like you would not believe, a lot worse than we have in the United States. And they're exposed to glyphosate, and they're exposed to malnutrition, and they're exposed to horrible things. So that's the second project. The third project is volunteering as a trainer and other things with the Syrian refugees in Lebanon, where I live. Any of those things you can contribute to. But there are different priorities for different people, and I understand. I thank you so much. We're going to make dua, inshallah, to close. And I ask that you forgive me if I said something wrong. You make dua if you benefited from something we said, and you share it and spread the knowledge, inshallah, as much as you can. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك لنا يا ربنا فيما أعطيت واقض عنا شر ما قضيت. اللهم عافنا واعف عنا واهدنا وارزقنا يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم إنا نستودعك أنفسنا وأهلينا وأولادنا فارحم بنا يا أرحم الراحمين. يا لطيفا لم تزل ألطف فينا فيما نزل إنك لطيف لم تزل باللطف قد عودتنا يا رب آمن خوفنا واعف عنا يا كريم. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.